A clay tablet dug up from the ruins of Nippur holds a passage that scholars have been wrongly reading for over 100 years. The standard reading describes a single flood that wiped out the human race, but a 2011 rereading showed something far worse. The tablet doesn't describe one end, it describes seven. 7 separate worlds, each one rising, growing, and being wiped out before the next one began. The Sumerians kept count. We are world number 8. And the worst part? The tablet describes exactly how number 8 ends. The tablet itself is listed as CBS 10673 in the University of Pennsylvania Museum. It was pulled from the ground during the Nippur digs in the 1890s, part of a huge haul of clay tablets that took decades to fully read. Most of the focus went to the parts that matched the biblical flood. Scholars saw the link to Noah, put out their papers, and moved on. But the first column of the tablet, the part that comes before the flood, sat mostly ignored for over 100 years because nobody could agree on what it said. The Sumerian is broken in places, certain marks are unclear, and the passage uses a writing pattern that doesn't show up often in other texts, a repeating list where each entry follows the same shape but with different details. Early readers treated the repeating parts as poetic flair, the way ancient writers sometimes said the same thing twice for effect. They crushed the 7 entries into one story, one world, one end, one flood. In 2011, a new reading effort backed by the Cuneiform Digital Library Initiative took another look. The team used computer-based word tools to study the broken marks, checking them against over 90,000 other clay texts in the database. Their answer was that the repeating wasn't poetic, it was a pattern with purpose. Each entry described a different age, a different world, and a different disaster. The tablet was a list kept in order of time, a record of worlds that came before ours. The first world, according to the tablet, was called Eridog, not the Eridu we know from the Sumerian king list, but an older version, a city before that city, one that the Sumerians themselves thought of as ancient. The tablet describes Eridog as a place where humans lived close to the Anunnaki, where knowledge moved freely, and where the line between gods and men hadn't hardened yet. Eridog didn't fall to war or flood. The tablet says it was swallowed by what roughly means the breath of Anu, a fire that came from the sky and turned the land to glass. For decades, that phrase meant nothing to researchers, fancy words for divine punishment. Then, in 2004, a ground survey in southern Iraq found a layer of glass-like material in dirt samples dated to roughly 29,000 BCE. I mean, think about that for a second. This glass is the kind of stuff created when sand is hit with extreme heat and pressure. The only known natural process that makes it at that scale is a space airburst, a chunk of asteroid or comet blowing up in the sky with the force of a nuclear blast. The layer of glass sits at exactly the depth you'd expect for the time the tablet describes. The second world the tablet names is Bad-tibira. The text describes a people built around metalwork and mining, a group who pulled metals from the earth and shaped them into tools the Sumerians thought were godlike. Bad-tibira's end is described as the poison that rose from below, a disaster where the ground itself turned toxic. Water became unfit to drink, crops withered, animals fled or collapsed where they stood. The people of Bad-tibira didn't vanish all at once, they faded slowly over what the tablet describes as 3 lifetimes of suffering. Modern volcano science has a name for this. It's called a gas release event, where huge amounts of carbon dioxide, sulfur, and hydrogen sulfide leak from underground lava pools through cracks in the earth. It poisons the water, chokes the plants, and makes the air itself unbreathable in low-lying areas. The land between the rivers sits on a fault line that has caused exactly these kinds of events. Lake Nyos in Cameroon took 1,700 lives in a single night in 1986 through the same process, just on a smaller scale. The third world is Larak. The tablet describes Larak as a people of star watchers, people obsessed with tracking what moved across the sky. Their end is described as the sky that fell, an event where the heavens crashed down onto the earth. Stars moved from their fixed spots. The sun vanished for what the tablet calls a season of darkness. When light came back, Larak was gone. If you made it this far, hit subscribe. I cover ancient mysteries and buried history every week, and what I'm about to share about the remaining worlds gets much stranger. The way Larak's end is described matches what modern climate scientists call a volcanic winter or impact winter. A massive eruption or asteroid strike throws enough dust into the upper sky to block sunlight for months or years. Worldwide heat drops fast, plant growth stops, entire food chains fall apart. The Toba eruption roughly 74,000 years ago did exactly this, cutting the human population down to an estimated 10,000 people. A near-extinction moment for the species that we still carry in our DNA. Now, with the fourth world, the pattern shifts. The tablet doesn't start with the people of Sippar, it starts with the water. The waters that rose without rain. Not a flood from storms or rivers spilling over, but a slow, steady rise of the ocean itself. Coastlines vanished, cities built near water were swallowed over the course of decades. Only then does the tablet describe Sippar as a people of laws and order, a group who built complex rankings of power and systems of justice. They scattered inland but never rebuilt their world. This is a dead-on description of what happens when ice sheets melt after an ice age. Between 14,000 and 8,000 BCE, ocean levels around the world rose over 120 meters as the ice melted. This wasn't slow in human terms. In some stretches, the sea rose as much as 4 meters per 100 years. Entire coastal regions vanished within a few lifetimes. The Persian Gulf itself was dry land during the coldest point of the last ice age. What is now 30 meters of water was once a green river valley. If earlier peoples built along those ancient shores, they're now under the Gulf, exactly where the Sumerians said they were. And somehow, the tablet gets stranger from here. The fifth world on the tablet is Shuruppak, the city the Sumerians linked most closely with the flood story, but the tablet's telling of Shurupak's end doesn't quite match the usual flood tale. It describes the ice that moved, a force that ground cities to dust and pushed entire groups of people southward. The cold came first, then the ice, then the floods when the ice pulled back. This order matters because it doesn't describe a single flood event. It describes a full ice age cycle. The ice pushes forward, wrecks everything, pulls back, and dumps walls of meltwater. The Sumerians pressed thousands of years of climate shift into a story that later peoples boiled down to a single godly flood. The sixth world is the most puzzling. The tablet names it Kiangi, which is actually the Sumerian word for Sumer itself. But this isn't the Sumer we know from the history books. This is an older version, a first draft of Sumer that the tablet says existed before the current one. Its end is described as the sickness that could not be seen, a plague that struck without any visible cause. People fell ill, seemed to recover, then never woke up. The tablet says the sickness moved from city to city along the trade roads as if it traveled in the goods themselves. This is a strangely exact picture of how fast-spreading diseases move along trade networks. The Black Death followed the Silk Road. Smallpox followed European trade ships to the Americas. If an older world had set up trade routes across the ancient Near East, a new disease moving along those routes would create exactly the pattern the tablet describes, and there's proof in the ground. Bones from sites in southern Iraq that date to before Sumer show signs of mass burial events, many bodies placed together with no signs of violence, matching what you'd see from a widespread plague. The seventh world is unnamed on the tablet. The marks are too broken to read, but its end is described in the most detailed words of all seven. The tablet calls it the turning of the Earth's heart, an event where the ground shook without stopping for what the Sumerians counted as 40 days. Water sources flowed backward. The stones that travelers used to find their way stopped pointing north. Mountains that had stood for ages crumbled. New mountains rose where flat land had been. The stars themselves seemed to shift position. Earth scientists have a name for this, a magnetic field flip. Earth's magnetic field switches from time to time, with north becoming south and south becoming north. The last full flip was the Brunus Matuyama event roughly 780,000 years ago, but smaller shifts, times when the field gets very weak and the poles drift, happen far more often. The Lachamp shift, roughly 41,000 years ago, weakened Earth's magnetic field to about 5% of its normal strength. With the field almost gone, harmful rays from the sun would have hit the surface full force. Finding your way by magnetic stone, the way ancient peoples did, would have been useless. The stars would seem to move because the northern lights, normally only seen near the poles, would have been visible all over the world, warping the night sky. The tablet says the Anunnaki watched these 7 endings and concluded that any world built on Earth was bound to break. Not because humans were flawed, but because the planet itself was unstable. Earth was a world that wiped itself clean over and over through fire, ice, water, poison, disease, and shifts in the ground. The Anunnaki's answer, according to the tablet, was to write down the knowledge of all 7 endings into what they called the Tablets of Destiny, a storehouse of knowledge designed to survive any disaster. The Tablets of Destiny show up in many Sumerian texts. They're usually described as the source of all godly power, the objects that gave their holder control over everything. But CBS 10673 describes them differently, not as tools of power, but as tools of memory, a record of everything that went wrong so that the eighth world might dodge the same fate. Now here's the part of the tablet that makes researchers uneasy. The description of the eighth world, our world, includes its ending. The tablet describes it as the fire that humans make, an ending that doesn't come from the sky or the earth or the water. It comes from people themselves. The world discovers the power of the atom, it learns to split the smallest pieces of matter, and it uses this knowledge to build weapons that can end everything. The Sumerian word used is gishbargal, which means, word for word, the great fire weapon. The same word shows up in other places in Sumerian writing, but always linked to godly power, never to human hands. CBS 10673 is the only known text where humans are described as holding this power, and the tablet doesn't treat it as a win, it treats it as the final mistake. The tablet describes the Anunnaki arguing over what to do about the eighth world. Some push for stepping in, others argue that the pattern can't be stopped, that every world sooner or later finds the means to destroy itself and uses it. The argument, according to the tablet, was never settled. The text cuts off mid-debate, either because the tablet is broken or because the Sumerians themselves didn't know how it ended. In 1952, Robert Oppenheimer, the physicist who led the building of the atomic bomb, gave a talk at the University of Rochester. A student asked him if the Trinity test in 1945 was the first time a nuclear weapon had been set off. Oppenheimer's answer has been debated for decades. He said, "Yes, in modern times." When pushed on what he meant, he wouldn't say more. But people close to him later pointed out that Oppenheimer was a student of Sanskrit who had read the Bhagavad Gita in its original language. He knew the ancient Indian texts that describe weapons of godly fire that could destroy entire cities. Weapons that sound a lot like what CBS 10673 describes. The Mahabharata, the ancient Indian epic, describes a weapon called the Brahmastra that made a glowing column of smoke and flame as bright as 10,000 suns. What came after matched what we now call radiation exposure. Hair and nails fell out, food went bad, soldiers who survived the initial blast were gone within weeks. The Mahabharata describes this not as myth but as history, a record of a war that really happened in an earlier age of the world. And this is where it stopped being easy to dismiss. The Mahabharata, like the Sumerian tablet, describes many ages, many worlds that rose and fell before the current one. The Hindu idea of yugas, great ages of the world, lines up almost perfectly, with the 7 worlds described in CBS 10673. Different names, different details, different cultural framing, but the shape is the same, a repeating cycle of worlds that build, grow, and destroy themselves or get destroyed by forces they can't control. The Hopi describe 4 earlier worlds, each destroyed by a different force. The Aztecs had their own version, 5 suns, 5 ages that each ended in disaster. Buddhist tradition describes kalpas, stretches of time so long they can't be measured, that end in fire, water, or wind. These cultures had no known contact with each other during the times these stories were formed, yet they all reached the same answer. This is not the first time. Worlds have risen and fallen before. The knowledge was lost each time, and the cycle keeps going. CBS 10673 says the Tablets of Destiny were stored in the Abzu, the same underwater structure described in other Sumerian texts as the Anunnaki's main base on Earth. If the tablets are still there, they hold the full record of what destroyed 7 worlds, the exact causes, the warning signs, and the points of no return. They hold the knowledge that could break the cycle, but the tablet also makes something clear. The Anunnaki didn't step in to save the first 7 worlds. They watched, they wrote it down, they argued, and they let it happen, every single time. The tablet doesn't say why, it doesn't say whether the Anunnaki couldn't step in or simply chose not to, but it does say that the 8th world was given something the other 7 never got. The ME, the sacred laws of how to build a world, were given straight to human beings for the first time. Writing, math, farming, law, star tracking, medicine. Not held by gods and handed out in pieces but turned over fully. The 8th world was given every tool it needed to survive. The question the tablet leaves open is whether the tools are enough, whether a world that has the knowledge to destroy itself can also have the wisdom not to. 7 worlds before us couldn't answer that question. The Sumerians wrote down their failures with the same care they used for grain counts and star charts. They weren't writing myths, They were writing a warning. The tablet sits in a museum in Philadelphia. You can ask to see it. Most people don't. It looks like every other clay tablet in the collection, small, cracked, covered in wedge-shaped marks that most people can't read. But if you know what those marks say, you're looking at something that should keep you up at night. A 4,000-year-old record that describes the end of 7 worlds and tells how ours will end, written by people who believed they were writing down facts, not stories. 7 worlds, 7 endings. We're number 8. And according to a piece of baked clay from ancient Nippur, the clock is already running. If ancient history like this keeps you up at night, you need to see what I'm covering next week. A classified Soviet mission found the exact structure the Sumerians described as the place where the tablets of destiny are stored. Click the video on screen now.